Alright, going to do a quick video here on flushing a extra large, actually it's probably a 2XL beaver that I just got yesterday. Skinned it out. I like to let them dry a little bit overnight before I flush and board them. You don't want to board the fur when it's wet. So I have a little setup here where I just took a couple sawhorses, and I can show a little bit better later. And then I got just a barrel underneath to catch all the fat. But when I flush beaver, I just do it the same way every time. It might not be the best way or the fastest way, but it works for me. And like I said, if you're doing, 5 or 6 a day, it's just good to have kind of the same pattern. So I start with the head up here, and I start with this leg, so halfway between the head and that leg. And I've got a couple different flushing knives. I've got a Necker 600 and a Caribou, and it's your preference. There's a lot of variations, and there's a lot of models out there, but these two seem to work pretty good for me. So on a small beaver, I can just use the dull side and just use the dull side the entire time and scrape the fat and gristle off. But with these bigger ones, right up here by the front leg, you're going to have a lot of gristle, and then this cheek meat here. So I use the sharp side initially. And I keep it pretty sharp, this Necker. The Caribou is actually a lot sharper, and I've never sharpened it since I got it about a year ago. But this Necker, I gotta touch up the blade once in a while. Big difference between the big ones and the small ones. I can flush a small beaver in about 5 or 6 minutes, and these big ones can take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. So here I switched to the dull side. I can push a little bit harder. This was a big female, so we have to get the little nipple there, and then the other one up there. Okay, and then I just rotate around. I guess that would be counterclockwise. And this is about 4 to 6 inches here, all around the belly. I just use the dull edge, and you can just scrape off that fat pretty easily with the dull edge. The skin is a little thinner there, so you don't want to be using the sharp side, and you don't have to. So you can see this line right here where the saddle or the muscle is. So up here I have to use the sharp side, but like I said, this little 4 to 6 inch section on the belly, I just use the dull side, and then just keep going around. Get here to the hind leg. I'm still using the dull side of the knife. So I've got it flushed off from the leg to the outside of the fur there. And this, when you get into this meaty portion here, and then the gristle towards the tail, you have to go back to the sharp side on these bigger beaver. At least I do. I'm just being a little gentle right here. I don't want to cut into the leg. Once I get most of it off, I switch back to the dull side, and then I can push a little bit harder. if you leave just a little bit of fat around here, the leg, that's okay for now. We can trim that off when we're boarding them. Okay, we're getting back towards the tail here, and all this meat that stayed on the hide, and then right here on the tail or the rump area, it's pretty thick. It's really gristly, and sometimes you'll find some scars back there. They're pretty territorial, and they do a lot of biting and fighting with each other, especially in the springtime. So, and they tend to bite each other in this rump area, and I guess that's why it's a little thicker. It's designed that way. So I'm using the sharp side here, and I don't just push straight. I kind of make a sideways, cutting motion. Just takes a little practice to know how hard to push, and how deep to go. You'll know when you go too deep. You'll know instantly. But if you're new to flushing beaver, you're probably going to screw up a couple. You're probably going to put a couple holes in them. But once you get a few under your belt, a few dozen or a few hundred, then you won't cut as many. But it still happens. Every once in a while I'll make a little mistake. Nick one skinning or push a little bit too hard with the flushing knife. But usually about the only place where I do make a little mistake is around the legs. Using the sharp side, if you push too hard, it'll just catch there and put a little cut, which you can sometimes cover that up in the boarding process. So we got most of that tail gristle off, going around towards the other hind leg. Go back to the dull side here, and I can push a little bit harder. You don't want to push this hard with the sharp side, or you will cut through. Like I said, with the sharp side, I'm not necessarily pushing. I'm using the sharpness to actually cut through the gristle. Get up towards the that other hind leg there, and be real gentle if you're going to use the sharp side. If you want to switch to the dull side, you can push a little bit harder. Alright, so now we're going to go along the belly on the other side, so I'm going to switch back to the dull side, and I can just do that 4 to 6 inches around the belly with the dull side. And I don't use a lot of guys put a rope around here and then they step on it, and I tried that when I first started out, but it was, for me, it was too slow to take the rope off and adjust it and put the rope back on. So I just got it at the right height for me. I just use a cloth or something here for a little padding, and then I just lean against it and it works for me. Like I said, each to their own. It might not be the best way in some people's opinion, but I'm not telling anybody how to flush beaver. I'm just showing people how I do it. So, works for me. Here we're getting up. There's gonna hit another nipple here. So on the beaver, they're a little bit more forgiving than like a sow, a coon or something, where if you push too hard on that nipple, you're gonna rip right through and tear a hole in the hide. Pretty big one. So the beaver, it just leaves just a little hole there. It's not a big deal. And there's the other one. So beaver have 4 nipples, and they're up in the front area, you know, up unlike some other mammals where they're back closer to the hind legs. Okay, now we're up here at the front leg, and we're going to get this big patch of really tough gristle right here. So I'll work on this back here, going to the sharp side again, getting that red part off, which is called the saddle. And you do have to get the saddle off on beaver and otter, unlike a mink or a muskrat where you can leave that red saddle on there. But beaver and otter, you have to get it off, and raccoon, of course, because there's a lot of fat trapped up underneath there. So if you leave it, the hide won't dry properly, and it can actually rot if there's too much fat trapped up under there. So I'm going to trim off, when I board this, I trim off about an inch or so of that front leg, so I'm not worried about the fat around there necessarily, because that's all going to get trimmed off anyways during the boarding process. So it's mid-January 2021, up here trapping in northern Wisconsin. And this time of year, I pretty much switched to all snare poles for beaver, unless I know where some bank holes are. The baited conibears, they just don't work as well for me. I have some success. You can see this guy here was caught in a conibear, but I actually found an entrance to a beaver lodge, and I was able to get through the ice and get a trap down in front of there. But probably 80% of the beaver I'm catching now are all on snare poles. More fat here to get off. So like I said, there's a little patch of gristle right here between the front leg and the ear, closer to the leg, that gets kind of stubborn sometimes. But you don't want to leave that on the hide. You got the other side pretty good. Okay, so we got all around the edge of the beaver, but you can see in the middle we still have a big patch of meat and tissue to get off. So I'm just going to go around it from here on out. I'm just using the sharp side and not pushing real hard. Just keep the blade kind of level to the hide. Don't attack it with too sharp of an angle, or you're going to cut through. Another thing on the snare poles, I wanted to set some today, but it's 35 degrees, and I do not set snares when it's above freezing. That's just me personally, a lesson learned, because if they don't freeze in right away, then if the beaver comes up and gets caught, they can come up through the hole in the ice, and you don't want that. You want them to get caught under the ice, and so they drown within, you know, a minute or two. If they're sitting around fighting, able to get air and stay alive for a few hours, one, they can get away with your snare pull rig, but or they can just damage the hide by that snare can cause damage to the fur, which lowers the value. So me personally, I only set the snares when it's below freezing, preferably below about 25 or 20, so they freeze pretty quick. Just rotating the hide around, seeing the spots I miss. So these bigger beaver, the XL, 2XL, 3XL, I mean, there's some time involved. And a lot of guys will say it's not worth it because the price of fur is so low. I mean, I'll be lucky to get, you know, $24 to $28 for this prime Eastern extra dark 2XL beaver, so $28. So if you do the math, you know, the time I spent setting the trap and going back out to check the trap and then hauling this guy out of the woods. Takes me about 10 minutes to skin them. Like I said, usually about 15 minutes or so to flesh them, another 15 minutes to stretch it. I'm not making very much per hour trapping. And so those guys, you know, that question why anybody would still trap in this market, I just say, are you still fishing? You know, the price of fish is way down, so it doesn't make sense to go fishing. I'm not a big fisherman, by the way, but so I'm retired, more or less, so this is my hobby. I don't go fishing. I don't hunt that much. I don't really hunt small game. I hunt deer for food. We eat deer. We eat venison probably at least four days a week. So in November we fill the freezer with deer meat. We also do eat some beaver, which is very good in my opinion. Alright, almost done here. One little spot left. got it on. Double check here. So I don't know if you can see much in the camera, but all of the big hunks of fat, all of the meat, the saddle, the gristle is gone. And now this hide weighs about 75% less than it did before I started fleshing. So we'll throw this guy on a board, and I let him dry for at least a week, preferably longer. Here in the garage, I keep it at about 55 degrees and low humidity. I just want to make sure they're nice and dry before I send them off to auction. Now I'm going to disinfect my hand before touching my camera.